Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nation Watch for today's Sunday, September 7th, 2025. We're coming to you live from the studios of Congress Place to File. Nation Watch is a production of the People's National Congress Reform, and we are happy to be with you again today. Circumstances considered. The emphasis over the past 3 months was on general and regional elections 2025. Those elections were run off on September 1, 2025, and some numbers are out. Some declarations have been made, and we'll discuss those declarations and the process leading to them. And declarations here is a term used fairly loosely, given what we know about the declarations from our commissioners. My guest today to discuss the process is Mr. Vincent Alexander. Mr. Alexander, as you know, is a commissioner of the Guyana Elections Commission, a long-standing member of the commission, and he represents the he was nominated rather by the opposition parties along with Desmond Trotman and Charles Corbyn. Mr. Alexander, before we get into, well, first of all, welcome to Nation Watch, and thank you very much for giving up some of your day's activities to spend the next hour or so with us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Before we actually get into the meat of our conversation, and for the benefit of viewers who may be joining us for the first time or who may not be familiar with your role in these electoral processes over the years, when did you first become a commissioner, and are you the longest serving of the commissioners, or is there someone who's been there before you?
No, I became a commissioner in 2007, and I am the longest serving commissioner. There is no other commissioner there now who was there when I got there. They all came subsequently, 2007 to present, some approximately 18 years.
18 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking here not just about experience, but we're talking about frontline active participation, and we're talking about in-depth study of both the law and the process of the conduct of elections, and a deep understanding of what the Election Commission ought to be doing and its structure and so on. So we're getting here an understanding of this process that led us to where we are today. Ms. Alexander, you are on record. In fact, you have been on record for some time now, at least 4 years, and more recently last Sunday, saying that in your considered opinion, the Guyana Elections Commission is not in a position to deliver free, fair, and credible elections. You are on record as saying that a number of things were necessary in the lead up to elections 2025, and those things we have not seen happening. One, and this is from the top of my head, you talked about there needing to be a system to remove from the list of electors persons who migrated and died abroad, and that there was no system to remove such names. You talked about the need to have a mechanism to verify information regarding citizens and the duration of their residency as a qualifier for them to be entitled to voting rights. You talk about the rights of the incarcerated, except those who have committed offenses, of which there are none, to vote in these elections. You have talked about there needing to be a process, a system to remove dead people from the list. you have alluded to a mechanism in document form, which is complied with in the breach, because deaths are not all registered with the registrar of births and deaths, and therefore those not registered cannot be removed. You pointed to a number of things that are required. You explained to this nation over the last 4 years the need for biometrics as a form of identification at the place of poll to prevent duplicated voting. All these mechanisms, all these measures, all these processes you spoke about are intended to ensure that the constitutional guarantee of one person, one vote is obtained, and therefore free, fair, and credible elections. Talk to us, please, Mr. Alexander, about the just concluded general and regional election in the context of what you made clear are required elements to accomplish this.
Thank you very much, Mervyn, for the opportunity to once again repeat and reiterate what I've been doing for some time now. I would like to back up a bit and also to reiterate what I have been iterating for some time now. I have said that an electoral system is intended to provide an opportunity for the citizens to put in place a government that's responsive to the demographic and political landscape of the country. And I've also, in that regard, I've often said that one of the problems we have in Guyana is that we have a majoritarian system at work, which does not allow for a government that is reflective of the people. It may be reflective of the majority will of the people, but not reflective of the will of the people at large, insofar as it imposes majority on a minority in a system of democracy which suggests that there should be inclusion, meaning that the minority should not be excluded from the process of decision making. And if in fact I were to go to the three pillars of democracy, which are representation, responsible behavior, and responsive behavior, I will show that our system does not fulfill those criteria. The first one is representation. It means that democracy seeks to have a system where all of the people are represented in the decision-making process. We have an electoral system that supposedly allows for people to identify their representatives. But we do not have a system that follows through to allow for true representation. So, for example, in Parliament, the majority is able to make all the decisions, and the minority are hardly able to truly represent their people. And this has to be seen in the context of a plural society, a society where you have ethnic enclaves, where we do not necessarily have the same issues, the same problems, and don't necessarily have the same shared values. And therefore, the system has to be responsive to these differences. We are diverse. And our electoral system, throwing up a majority, does not allow for a response to the diversity of our society. So the first problem is with representation. The second problem is with responsible behavior. And these things are interrelated. Responsible behavior means that the way in which things are done should provide for similar cases or similar circumstances to be treated in like manner. So, for example, the two of us go to get a job. We're in a similar situation. We both vying for a job. What should apply in that circumstance is looking for the qualifications between the two of us, if we have the required qualifications, looking for the experience and things like those that are predetermined. But we have a system where today you can go for a job and those things are applied, and tomorrow you go and they're not applied. So we don't have a system that is a responsible system. And I'm speaking from the experience, for example, of the Ghana Elections Commission, where we have specified certain criteria for jobs. And when some people come, those criteria are not applied. And when you look at that in the context, again, of the plurality of our society, the non-application has to do with who you are very often along the political and or ethnic lines. And the third element of democracy is responsiveness. A government should be responsive to the people in between elections and cannot simply say that because they're elected, they have the right to make decisions. And being responsive means that they must have mechanisms to be in consultation with the people. They must be responsive to the various media that people use to express themselves. They must be responsive to the various interest groups in which people find themselves, and that might be in terms of non-governmental organizations. They have to be responsive during that period, in between elections. And so, for example, if there's a protest, then they have to understand that the people are expressing their views, and as government have to be responsive. No, those things are absent in our real politics. Those things are absent.
Well, let's narrow it down to GCOM. It can be argued that GCOM has not demonstrated a level of responsibility, and the GCOM has really been non-responsive to the calls of the citizenry of this country as it relates to the conduct of elections. And every citizen of this country has a right to speak to this whole question of the conduct of elections in the best interests of the entire nation of people.
You're quite right, Mervyn. What I've said can be contextualized in relation to GCOM. What is GCOM's role? GCOM's role is to conduct an election that allows every citizen to have a single vote, and that for the accumulation of those votes to determine who will be in government. So I'm saying two things from the inception. One is unrelated to GCOM. The first one is that the way we craft our system should be responsive to the plurality of our society. And therefore, we should not simply have a system where a majority prevails. We should have a system where all are accommodated in the decision-making process. So that's the first. And GCOM is not responsible for that not being. GCOM has been given a system. But the system that GCOM has been given has a responsibility to conduct elections that ensures that suffrage prevails. In other words, each citizen who's an adult can express his or her choice. And therefore, in the context of suffrage, if one person is allowed to express his or her choice twice, then the system is failing because it is not allowing for equal opportunity to express one's choices, giving somebody else an advantage, and therefore is producing a product that's not reflective of the will of the people collectively. So,
and I want to interject here, if you don't mind. There is a perception, a wide-ranging perception, that the Ghana Election Commission is an extended arm of the People's Progressive Party by the way it operates. And therefore, to suggest that maybe GCOM is not responsible may not be for the area that you just mentioned may not be altogether true, because it is apparent that GCOM is exercising through its functions the wish of the People's Progressive Party, which is not necessarily the will of the people. And I'm not talking here about outcomes of election, I'm talking about the manner of conduct.
Right, because you see, when we talk about responsible behavior, we're going back to this contention that things have to be done in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have standards, you have to have criteria, you have to have some degree of equity. In the case of GCOM, we have a system where it's majoritarian now. We vote.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we make decisions is not necessarily based on principles. It's not necessarily based on the application of principles. And I gave the example earlier on of the employment.
Mm-hmm.
We don't necessarily apply the principle. What we do is show preference based on interest. And the interest here happens to be a reflection of the political, and I'll be go as far as to say a reflection of the interest of the political parties. And what you have is the People's Progressive Party prevailing because the chairperson seems also to be reflecting that interest in the way in which she contributes more by a vote than anything else to the decision-making process. So that we have this issue of responsible behavior because we are not guided by the necessary principles and criteria and standards. So for example, in ensuring that it can be one person, one vote, you have to have a system that ensures that identity at the time of poll is at the center of your operation. And if you have flaws in identification, then your system immediately stands to erode its very foundation. If you can't be assured of one person, one vote, because the way you do the identification allows for one person to come twice, then you are eroding the very foundation of the system. And that's the problem that we have with GCOM. GCOM has not put in place the mechanisms for the responsible conduct of its operations. Responsible conduct of its operations means, for example, if the Constitution says that every Guyanese over the age of 18 who is registered should be able to vote, then you cannot have a system that ignores the right of the incarcerated to vote, because they are part of the citizenry who are entitled to exercise that vote. And if they don't exercise that vote, starts to corrupt the very system of one person, one vote. And this is exactly the problem we have with the GCOM, that one, does not allow incarcerated persons to vote, that two, looks at our Constitution, which says that the Representation of the People's Act will outline certain things, and the Registration Act will outline some other things, and those acts have outlined that Commonwealth citizens who are resident and the domicile are entitled to vote, yet GCOM does not address the question of being domicile and allows only for a year of residency. And we see what that means in real fact in terms of who are the people who are brought in and allowed to exercise a franchise that they're not entitled to. So again, it's the area of irresponsible behavior. The system is corrupted. And what must be noted about GCOM, you can have a system where out of lack of foresight, certain things are not in place. But in the case of GCOM, these issues have been placed on the table. They have been placed on the agenda. And GCOM, by a majority vote, has consciously decided they will not do these things which are mandatory.
But what is instructive, Mr. Alexander, is that the things, and I mean you said it, but I want to say it a little bit clearer for the benefit of our viewers. The wishes of the People's Progressive Party have been honored by the Guyana Elections Commission through the vote of its chairman. The People's Progressive Party's changed position from 2015 to now regarding a clean voters list and biometrics. In 2015, they demanded it. In 2020, they abandoned that demand and switched to the opposite. And GCOM facilitated an electoral process with a bloated list, thanks to the vote of the chair. The question of cleansing that list of names that ought not to have been there, the People's Progressive Party clearly didn't want them removed, and GCOM facilitated those names remaining on that list. The People's Progressive Party fought tooth and nail against biometrics when the entire opposition and the majority of citizens of this country called for and endorsed the call for biometrics at the place of poll as a form of identification to prevent duplicate voting or other irregular activity regarding voting. And the People's Progressive Party fought against that. GCOM, through the vote of its chairman, facilitated the blindsiding, the avoidance of obtaining that as a part of our electoral process, when in fact, since I believe it was 2018, budgetary resources were allocated by the Granger administration to start a process that will head in that general direction. Our citizens need to be aware of this. I mean, how can the outcome of a process so deliberately flawed be accepted as an expression of the will of the people?
Now, let's put it this way. The process itself loses legitimacy, and therefore one cannot give credence to the product because the process itself loses legitimacy. But let me go back to what you were saying. The problem starts with the very membership of the commission. The commission is intended to be a constitutional body. Persons are nominated by the governing party and nominated by the opposition and appointed by the president with a constitutional instrument. But we have a situation in GCOM where persons tell you clearly that they represent a party, so that they are flying in the face of the very instrument and the very constitution that has brought their being into existence as commissioners. And so not only do they tell you they represent a party, but they then go on to ensure that the will of the party prevails in the face of responsible behavior, because responsible behavior will call upon them to be objective, will call upon them to do the things that are required to ensure that GCOM can deliver the product through a process that is certifiable. But we do have a situation where they deliberately fight against that certifiable process and therefore corrupt the whole thing called GCOM, and as a consequence doesn't lend legitimacy to any or validity to any outcome of that organization. So yes, it has become in practice, in real life, an extension of the People's Progressive Party and the manner in which they seek to deal with governance in this country, a manner in which suggests that they want to be in complete control and that only their will should prevail. And that is what has invaded and infected GCOM.
There's a very interesting comment I saw earlier. A brilliant person making the point that the APNU had 5 years to clean the voters list, and asking what did the APNU do. I find it passing strange that in this day and age, some of us would deliberately abandon a position of knowledge and adopt a position of ignorance. It is well known that political parties do not clean lists. What is clear is that the People's Progressive Party, using its influence over the Guyana Elections Commission, particularly its chairman, has managed to achieve its intended outcomes within that process. And what resulted is that, well, it appeared as though the intention of GCOM and the People's Progressive Party was to press the APNU and other political opposition parties into saying, look, if we don't get what we want, we wouldn't participate in these elections, so that they could occupy all the political space. So opposition political parties had to enter these elections to try to accommodate, to try to occupy political space in the interest of keeping our democracy on the path to development and representing the people's interest. Now,
but Mervyn, that person's comment is disingenuous.
Of course it is.
I tell you why it's disingenuous. Between 2015 and 2020, APNU AFC in Parliament did provide a subvention for the conduct of house-to-house registration. So to accuse them of not using the period when they were in to do what they're now calling for is disingenuous, because they did in fact embark upon a house-to-house registration exercise. That exercise was aborted because the PPP went to court and sought a ruling which suggests that you cannot have a list built on a complete new registration process,
which had started.
That you have to retain the old register and to get the list out of that old register. So that contention is disingenuous, because it does not in fact accept the facts of the matter. And this is one of the difficulties I have, that very often people come onto these programs and they do not exhibit a knowledge of or a commitment to the truth and seek to distort things. We did start the exercise.
To some, the truth is alien, but we know the exercise had started. That is in fact how my address was changed. It was not changed through a claims process. It was changed through a house-to-house registration process.
Because what we did when the exercise was aborted, in keeping with the ruling of the goodly judge, we used the information for purposes of transfers and corrections and things like that, but did not in fact cancel any previous registration. We retained the old database.
Now I want to get to observation missions here. And this is to make the point to our viewing and listening public, to consolidate this point that I made earlier. Observer missions in 2020 made a number of recommendations, including recommendations to do with the list and its sanitization. Not a single recommendation made by any of the missions in 2020 was acted upon by the Guyana Elections Commission, unless I missed something. Fast forward to elections 2025. Observer missions came. They observed the day's activity and commented on the day's activities. The EU mission, for its part, made the point that the political playing field was not level. It was stacked against the opposition. There was an abuse of state resources. New projects were being commissioned, and fresh projects were being launched a day, 2 days before elections. In India, for example, there's a rule that no capital projects will begin in the year in which an election is due. Right down to the wire, the People's Progressive Party has been cutting ribbons, has been turning sod for this and turning sod for that, drawing wool over the populace's eye. In the meantime, the observer missions reports have been relegated to the dustbins of history of this country. And we are not moving forward. There's no evidence of a responsiveness again from the Guyana Elections Commission, speaking again to its high level of irresponsibility in the conduct of its constitutional mandate. Help us to understand what is happening with these observer mission reports as far as the Guyana Elections Commission is concerned.
The first thing I want to say, and probably to repeat, is that an observer is exactly what the word says, an observer. An observer does not have an involvement in the conduct of the elections,
right?
Nor does an observer have the authority to impose decisions in relation to elections. They make observations.
Mm-hmm. And they recommend.
And recommendations. Yeah. And so we have to see all that they say in that context. And we also have to understand that to a very large extent, their observation is restricted to the polling day.
Mm-hmm.
And so we may be speaking to issues that are pre-election issues, that are post-election issues, and that are not manifest on polling day. So you may have on polling day a process that is peaceful, as everybody says the last election has been, where the officials seem to be doing their job, as everybody says, is saying the case has been. But that does not mean that the issues, pre-election issues, the groundwork is in place. And so when an observer makes his observations, it has to be contextualized into what was visible and knowable to the observer. Now, having said that, observers are a kind of a voluntary group of people sponsored by an organization, be it an international organization or a local organization. They're not government. So that even if the observers come from the EU, they themselves are not the government of the EU in the EU countries. So they don't have the clout that, for example, another government might have in its subsequent relations to say, we made these observations and we're not going to be friends with you because you're not doing things the way we expect things to be done, sharing values. So there's a limitation in terms of the impact of what observers say in their observation report. It is left largely to the sovereign state to determine whether to embrace or not embrace what the observers have said. And we have a situation in Guyana where, in the main, we have not embraced what the observers have said. The only time we embraced it was in the Hyde period.
Yeah, 92, 2001.
The Hyde period embraced a lot of what observers said, but a lot of that embrace had to do with the clout of the nation which the observers came from. So a lot of what's going on now has to do with the disposition of the governments of the countries
feel those observers
come from. And in that regard, I want to make an observation. I saw a letter today, I think, or a news item, where the former American ambassador
and the British High Commissioner,
and the British High Commissioner, both of whom are now, I don't think they're diplomatic service, but they have seen it fit to come together to collectively make a statement as if they were still in situ as the ambassador and high commissioner. A statement which says, well, everything is hunky-dory in Guyana and promise and all of that. And the only thing I would say is this, that their disposition goes beyond observers. Their disposition now largely has to do with interest. Because the nation may not know, but both of those persons, I am made to understand, have an economic interest in Guyana, which may be well served by the present state of things in the country. And I think it's
and there's another as well.
Yes, there's another who came as an observer. Who came as an observer. So we do have these situations where interests are prevailing over responsible behavior.
Let's talk a little bit about declaration. GCOM says that it has made a declaration. The PPP nominated commissioners are saying that they're accusing Vincent Alexander and the two other opposition nominated commissioners as having abstained from the decision regarding the declaration. As I understand it, after these districts declare their numbers, those numbers are required to be sent to the commission, where the commissioners under the chairmanship of the elected chair of that commission will discuss these results. And once they're found to be satisfactory, found to have been in compliance with the rules governing the declaration and so on, and that the numbers are okay, then the commission will declare district by district officially, after which it will declare the total number of votes allocated, well, earned or gained by each political party in the contest. And then after that, it will declare which had the largest number of votes, and consequent upon that, which presidential candidate is identified as the president-elect. My understanding from this particular process is that the chairman declared Irfan Ali to have been elected president. And following your insistence and the insistence of your colleague opposition nominated commissioners, proceeded to declare the number of votes for each political party. Does that constitute a declaration compliant with the constitutional mandate of this commission?
First of all, let me speak to the accusation leveled by Mr. C.S. Gunraj that the commissioners nominated by the opposition boycotted a meeting and sought to sabotage the process and delay the announcement of the results. I was actively involved, as my other colleagues, in that recount process and retabulation process. I was on, was it Friday? I visited the recount center where a recount was still being undertaken for Region 5.
Yeah.
I left that place somewhere around probably 8 plus in the evening. I proceeded to the tabulation center where the tabulation was ongoing after the recount of sub-district 4
Of District 4.
of District 4. And that was ongoing. I left that place, which means that the tabulation for District 7 had not yet started because the recount was incomplete. I left that place somewhere in the vicinity of 9 in the evening. And subsequently, upon checking my phone, saw an invitation for a meeting at 11.
This is after 9. That's less than 2 hours.
Yes, yes. Saw an invitation for a meeting at 11. It's unbelievable that an organization with a matter as important as this would expect that, one, I was in the vicinity, I was aware of the progress. No one said anything or consulted me on anything about the conclusion of that process to go into another process. And upon my departure, would expect that I would be available for a meeting with an hour, 2 hours notice. It's just unbelievable. Those persons who were available, I rather suspect that they were a part of the determination of
the time.
Of the time.
Yeah.
You know, and so to try now to go public and suggest people boycott it. If I'm going to boycott something, I'll say I boycott it. One of my colleagues did not see the notice until 3 in the morning. Was he in a state to boycott? But here is this defamation taking place in the public that people boycotted. What happened is a reflection of the poor administration of GCOM.
Irresponsible again.
And irresponsible behavior of GCOM. That is what happened. And they have to take responsibility for the meeting not being held on that evening. With due notice, the meeting was held last evening.
I'm sorry, but I understand there's a rule that says if there's no quorum when the meeting is called, then within 24 hours, another meeting can be called.
In the case of the president.
And if there is, well, whatever number turn. Okay.
Has to be
so
full.
The opposition or the government nominated and the chair
yes, can
constitute a meeting.
Right.
So is it a case, therefore, that this was deliberately done to ensure that there was in fact a quorum with or without you?
No, I wouldn't. I don't allow my imagination to venture that far. I don't allow my imagination to venture that far. But obviously,
you've lost an appreciation for the real PPP, I see.
I don't allow my imagination to venture that far. But what in fact happened is that the meeting was reconvened in keeping with the provisions of the Constitution for last night, and it was a fully attended meeting by all of the commissioners.
Talk us through that meeting,
but
please.
In some regards, again, the manner of the conduct of that meeting exhibited complete disregard for our constitutional and legal provisions, and it shows the way in which our systems are completely corrupted. Let me read for you Section 99 of the Representation of the People's Act. Publication of election results, and this is an amendment of the 12th of 2006, December 2006. It says as follows: as soon as practicable, but not later than 15 days after election days, the Commission shall publicly, and let me emphasize, publicly declare the results of the election, and shall cause to be published in the Gazette a notification thereof, specifying the number of votes cast for each list of candidates, the number of rejected ballots, the number of seats allocated to each list of candidates, and the names of the persons who, as a result of the election, have become members of the National Assembly. And it goes on to speak about what happens in the case of the joiner. We attended a meeting yesterday evening where, in the first instance, the spreadsheet with the results was circulated. And that was circulated
for the districts.
For the districts. And that was circulated in keeping with the provisions which said that the Chief Elections Officer, having received the reports from the returning officers and the supernumerary returning officers, shall compile a report to present to the Commission, on which basis the Commission will make its declaration of the results. So yes, the CEO compiled the report. That report was brought, and the chairperson proceeded to read a declaration of the results of the elections, a declaration which primarily said which party had prevailed globally, and as a basis of which Dr. Irfan Ali is the president elected. And that's what the chairman did. And the place went silent. After a period of silence, one commissioner then sought to move a motion for the adjournment of the meeting, a motion which was then seconded by another commissioner, which caused me at that time to pose a question: what is meant by that adjournment? Because nothing really that the Constitution provided for had taken place. But here we were adjourning. In addition to the fact that the documentation was circulated at the meeting, and we had hardly had time to peruse the documents. And I would, in no circumstance, allow myself to be involved in the process without perusing the documents, especially after my experience of 2011.
Which is what I want to interject here with. In 2011, during the course of your perusal of these documents, you unearthed a miscalculation, we'll leave it as miscalculation, which, had it gone unnoticed, would have given to the People's Progressive Party a seat that it had not won. In this case, you had no time to peruse anything but a declaration short, in my view, of being fully compliant with the mandate of GCOM has been made. What are the implications of that?
I didn't contest the declaration of the presidency because we had been involved in the counting process. And from the counting process, it was discernible that the PPP had prevailed. So that's a plurality. They had prevailed. So whilst the formality was not quite correct, I had no problem with that. The problem was that there was no declaration in the manner in which this law prescribes for declaration. This law says two things. The commission shall publicly declare. So in some regards, we still haven't done what the law requires.
Well, this is the point.
Shall publicly declare. I reminded that commission last night that in 2011, the commission, having received the report and having agreed with the content of the report, having determined the content of the report because we had to change something, proceeded to Pegasus, where a public declaration was made in keeping with the law. We had no public declaration last night. I don't know if the chairperson will deem a commission meeting to be a public declaration. But we had no public declaration last night.
Quick question. How did it get to the media?
What?
The so-called declaration.
I suppose that in the first instance, commissioners went out and told the media what had occurred. I suppose a press release was then sent out as well, right? Of the so-called declaration. That press release cannot be seen as the public declaration. But I raised the question of the fact that even what was done was not a declaration of the results, because the law specifies shall publicly declare the results. What the chairman declared was in fact just the presidency and not the results, though we had the spreadsheet with the results. And so on my insistence, she then mustered some words to declare what's on the spreadsheet as the results.
Without reference to the districts.
She did reference the districts. She did reference the districts, saying district so-and-so, which party had prevailed. But we continued not to have a public declaration. And there were those in there, among the administration, who sought to indicate to me that, well, the public declaration is the Gazette notification. But here the law is very clear, shall publicly declare the results of the elections and shall cause to be published. So it's two things, publicly declaring the results and causing to be published in the Gazette and notification thereof.
Notification of the announcement of the declaration.
And it specifies the things that ought to be in that notification. So we really have a problem in GCOM where they either have contempt for people and for processes, or they are bereft of knowledge, or
not those brilliant people,
or a combination of both. But at the end of the day, it adds up to a GCOM that is not fit for purpose. Even in the circumstance where one commissioner goes out a few nights ago to tell the world how professional GCOM operated and how well GCOM functioned. But this is evidence of that professionalism. Kudos to those ordinary workers in the polling stations who seem to have done a professional job. But here is the leadership of GCOM at the very top of its administration, not operating in keeping with the laws of this country.
There's a provision in the legislation there. I don't recall chapter and verse, as they say in church, but one that says that at least one agent of each political party shall be allowed to accompany the ballot box from the place of poll to wherever it's going. I was there moving behind 13 ballot boxes from one polling place with 13 stations. None of our agents was permitted to enter any of those vehicles carrying ballot boxes. I proceeded to monitor the arrival of a total of 148 ballot boxes in Subdistrict 1 of 3. None of our agents was permitted to accompany any ballot box from the place of poll to the place of storage. It is clear that GCOM's operations outside of the declaration were also outside of the legislative framework.
What the legislative framework provides for is for the agents to accompany the ballot boxes. The legislation provides for that.
Yeah.
But it has a little caveat that creates the problem. It does not provide for GCOM to provide accommodation for the agents. It says that they may be accommodated in that transmission process if accommodation is available.
Well, clearly in a 15-seat minibus with one ballot box.
But then goes on to say that the agent can accompany the process in his or her own transportation. So that, yes, Mervyn, if they have a 15-seater minibus and it has accommodation for the agents, then they should be accommodated. They should be accommodated.
Let's go back a bit to 2020. When you led the call inside of the commission for GCOM to cause a review of its operation conduct of the 2020 elections, with a view to getting a clear understanding of where you were strong and where you were not as strong as you ought to be so that you can strengthen. I gather that you were not asking for an audit per se.
No, not at all.
But a simple review of the processes to establish pitfalls and areas of strength. Those requests of yours were never acted upon.
They were acted upon.
They were?
Yes, negatively. You see, you can act on something in two ways, by commission or by omission.
Yeah.
They didn't simply ignore me. They said to me, no, it will not happen. So it was acted upon negatively.
What are your thoughts going forward? Elections 2025 have come to an end, and we have discussed for almost an hour now things that we've been talking about. I know that some viewers may say this is all talk, as some have said already. But the point is, there were protests, as we call it, in front of GCOM every single Tuesday of every single week for 5 long years. And GCOM never, with respect to the list, with respect to biometrics. And here we are now with an outcome from a process that is clearly flawed, with a process that you have said in your considered opinion is ill-equipped or is not equipped at all to deliver free, fair, and credible elections. Do you see yourself making similar recommendations in this instance, and will go?
The Chief Elections Officer presented to us a plan for the conduct of elections. When the issue about advising the president of the date came up, this Chief Elections Officer then said that he never presented a plan. He presented a list of activities. Although ad nauseum in our minutes, we have
plan,
adjust the plan, but he told the meeting that wasn't a plan. It was a list of
So even the
activities.
minutes are unlawful. They
Right.
misrepresent the discussion. This is what the CEO is saying.
I don't think you could say that, because the minutes are what they are. Is that in that plan, there was a provision for an evaluation. That's my recollection. And I'm getting aged, you know, they say we geriatrics, so I'm probably forgetful. However, in a meeting of GCOM, I raised the question of the evaluation, contending that my recollection was that the plan had an evaluation. The response of the CEO to me was, well, I do have in the plan a report, but I don't have an evaluation in the report. I then said to him, if you don't have one, I'm now suggesting an amendment to the plan, because you've been amending it every week, as you don't do things on time and so. I'm now suggesting an amendment to include an evaluation if by chance I am wrong in suggesting you previously had an evaluation. And for all intents and purposes, it was agreed that there will be an evaluation.
This is 2020.
2020. 2025. I'm talking about 2025.
2025.
Yes. For all intents and purposes, they then agreed that there will be an evaluation. So I'm waiting to see when that evaluation occurs. I had conversation with one of these advisors, the international advisors, on this question, and he shared my view that there should be an evaluation as a matter of course. He's one of the advisors. I had a conversation with a commissioner, appointed commissioner, nominee of the government, and explained to him what was meant. And he seemed to have concurred that we would need a retreat for that purpose, you know, and seemed to have concurred. So this matter has been brought to the attention of many, and I am anxiously awaiting, but will not overstay my time awaiting.
Your thoughts going forward in terms of future elections? There's one scheduled for next year. There's one on the calendar for next year, local government elections. Do you anticipate this evaluation to take place well in advance of preparations for those next set of elections? And do you see the outcome of such a retreat impacting positively in the conduct of those elections next year?
I have issued a public statement, a letter, on the question of my abstention. In that letter, I indicated I thought that my role has morphed into that of an advocate for transformation, rather than someone who is simply sitting there looking at these mechanical activities that GCOM has been involved in. And so I've advocated already for that evaluation. I expect that evaluation to take place, and I see that evaluation at the time for continued advocacy for improving on GCOM's systems, and I would maintain that that should occur before we get to any other election. That would be my disposition. The Lord knows what will happen. There are all sorts of views
I wonder if he does indeed.
being circulated. The problem with the Lord, sometimes he doesn't communicate to us. He knows. But the Lord knows what will happen, because there are all sorts of views being expressed about the future of the commission, given the emergence of a new opposition leader.
Yeah. There was and still is some concern about the silence and absence of the chairman of the Elections Commission for a period of perhaps up to 3 weeks in the run-up to the actual declaration in which she participated. Is the chairman in good health? Is she active? Is she on the job?
I'm in no position to comment on the chairman's health. I myself did not see the chairman during the period of the recount. I saw her yesterday evening. She was in attendance. But there clearly has been a problem of public accountability, and the chairman can be held responsible for that. Mm-hmm. And that absence, for me, reflects the continuity of that act, not accounted to the public.
So it could be deliberate avoidance. Is that what you're suggesting? I know you're a very careful person when it comes to dealing with these matters.
Well, I would contend that it is, in fact, deliberate avoidance. I've sensed this disposition of the chair. Only now, deliberate avoidance, public engagement. And what has happened recently is that we've had the CEO and the DCEO having public engagements in which they say that they do not represent GCOM, they represent the administration. And I had reason internally to say to them that they are agents of GCOM, and anything they say is a representation. They can't go to the press and say, I can't answer that because I'm not speaking for the commission. Once they are out there, whatever they say, they're speaking for the commission.
Reconfiguration of the Guyana Elections Commission. I know that this is a constitutional body. I know that the appointments are indefinite. There's a reconfiguration of the opposition based on the declaration, the declared numbers, and so on. A reconfiguration of GCOM, do you see that on the table? Or
first of all, let me say this, that we have had a reconfiguration of the opposition more than once. Right? When I joined GCOM, it was the People's National Congress reform.
mm-hmm.
I have been in GCOM under the...
In fact, the People's National Congress reform won Guyana.
Reform.
Up to 2000 and...
I entered immediately after they won Guyana.
Okay.
Right? But the point I'm making is that you had the reform, you had the reconfiguration, and the membership of GCOM was unaffected by that reconfiguration, because you couldn't say that the APNU AFC was the same as the APNU, nor could you say that the APNU was the same
as the APNU AFC.
As the PNC reform. So we've had reconfigurations in terms of the root of the body which nominated me. And so this is just another reconfiguration. It may be more fundamental, but another reconfiguration. But I do not see the Constitution in its present formulation speaking to a change based on the reconfiguration. It may be an anomaly. It may be something that needs to be addressed, but it's not a straight administrative matter.
That is obvious, given the Constitution given the nature of the configuration, the establishment of GCOM as a constitutional body, and with all of the appointment particulars enshrined therein. Mr. Alexander, I'd like to thank you very much for again joining me here on Nation Watch to bring clarity to this whole process, this whole electoral process and conduct. Again, I say the numbers are as good as the process from which they flow. The process is clearly flawed. Mr. Alexander, in his view, has told us that repeatedly that he does not believe that GCOM is equipped at this time to deliver free, fair, and transparent elections in this country. And again, I say, the numbers are as good as the process from which they flow. If the tree is a poison, if the tree is poisonous, it cannot bear fruit that is not poisonous. We will leave you for now, ladies and gentlemen, and we will leave with you as we go a message from the presidential candidate of the Partnership for National Unity and leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Mr. Meet again next Sunday. God bless you.
During the September 1st general and regional elections. I take this opportunity to wish all Guyanese, regardless of the political party you supported. In spite of the manifestations in the electoral system, including a bloated list and the lack of biometrics, our party decided to participate in the elections held on the 1st September 2025. The deficiencies to which I refer undermine any basis for the creation of a framework for free, fair, and transparent elections. The number of irregularities which have been discovered and documented gives legitimacy to the position that the elections were not free and fair. These elections did not reflect the will of the Guyanese people. The clear purpose of the APNU coalition was to contest the elections, and if it were victorious, among other things, was to change the electoral system and other procedures to ensure free and fair elections. The inadequacies and imperfections of the existing electoral system are well known locally, regionally, and internationally. A brief glance of the report of the international observer groups which have monitored elections in Guyana have repeatedly identified and pointed to, for example, it's well documented that the 1997 elections in Guyana were marred by controversy and allegations of fraud, particularly regarding the tabulation of results in Region 4, Georgetown. The Organization of American States observed these elections and criticized the vote counting process, contributing to concerns about the integrity and credibility of the outcome. For instance, the OAS documented irregularities and procedural concerns in the tabulation process. The Commonwealth Observer Group in December 1997 stated, "We believe that the shortcomings contributed to the diminished credibility of the election results that were being announced by the Electoral Commission," unquote. The European Union's Election Observation Mission has been skating in its report on the September 1st, 2025 general and regional elections, saying that though the elections were peaceful, the playing field was not even. EU Chief Robert Bedron accused the PPPC of blurring the line between state and party and using state resources and unchecked financing to give itself a massive head start. By contesting elections, our party has retained occupancy of political space that provides the opportunity to contest against the dictatorial tendencies of the PPPC and advance the cause of social and economic justice, free and fair elections, and a democratic culture in Guyana. As a major political party, it is necessary that we maintain and utilize that space for the ongoing mobilization of our people and all relevant forces in order to attain the kind of society in which the morals and culture of democracy are firmly embedded. As a consequence of September 1st, 2025 elections, which were not free and fair, our party has found itself in virgin territory of not being the governing party or an opposition party. APNU, of which the PNC is a major party, has a wealth of experience in weathering political storms. We will come through this and we will be stronger and better. We will continue the journey towards the goal of making this society a prosperous and equal one in which all our citizens can enjoy all of the rights and benefits of the national resources of our country. I give you the assurance, APNU will never abandon or desert you, however difficult circumstances. I'm sure that the members of the coalition a historical moment in the politics of this country. The People's National Congress was also known more than 6 decades ago, even though it had managed to win 41% of the electorate. Yet the PNC picked itself up, and through the committed vote of its members and with hard work and dedication, it succeeded in achieving government approximately 3 years later. After the PNC's major loss in 1961, the leader of the party, Lyndon Burnham, at a mass rally at Border Green, asked his supporters, "Will you not watch with me for 1 hour?" Similarly, I appeal to all APNU supporters to watch with us at this critical hour. We are like the oak tree. We will re-emerge better and stronger. Thank you.